Today, we're talking about hormones and specifically talking about the 5 critical labs that you can use to identify which hormones are off for you and where to start. Have you ever heard, my labs are fine, but I still feel terrible? My labs came back normal, but I don't feel well, or my hair is falling out and I don't know what to do? Well, this is what we're talking about today. If that's you or somebody you know, if you feel tired, if you're gaining weight, or maybe your brain is foggy, or you're just not feeling like yourself, this episode is going to help you identify the areas that you can focus on. Welcome back to the Life Optimizer podcast. My name is Victoria. I'm a Yale trained certified nurse midwife and women's health specialist. I am so excited that you're here. We're going to go through 5 big buckets of labs, areas where to look, that every woman really 35 and older should look, especially if you're having symptoms, especially if you've been told that everything looks fine. So grab a pen to take notes, or easier yet, I have actually made a free downloadable PDF that I will email to you. You can look in the show notes, click on the link, get that PDF to you. And as I'm going through the labs, maybe take some notes as well, or highlight some things that stand out to you as we're talking. So that's available to you. Grab it as we're talking, take notes, and we'll go from there. So the problem with normal labs, I've talked a little bit about this before on the podcast, but I just want to reiterate how critical this is. Normal is not the same as optimal. Having a normal lab value doesn't mean that this level, the lab level that you have, is optimal for hormone function. Okay. So when we take normal ranges and the lab gives us a normal range, that is averages of a population. And our population is increasingly sicker. And so those averages are actually oftentimes lower than they should be. Okay. When you feel off and your labs come back normal, you feel like a crazy person. You feel like it's all in your head. And I'm here to tell you that it's not in your head. Something is happening, and there are ways to get to the root cause of it. I've had to do it myself. And so I am encouraged that you will find the answers that you're looking for. Women, especially in midlife, when they have symptoms or something feels off, they're told like, oh, it's just stress, it's just perimenopause, you're getting older, or they're told, you should exercise more, maybe cut carbs, maybe do keto and you'll feel better. But really, we're not looking for the root cause. We're just kind of throwing out blanket statements. And really, we should be giving our body the due diligence, and your body, if you're having symptoms, is giving you clues that something's not working. And so in functional medicine, we're not just looking for disease, we're looking for signs of dysfunction before the disease develops. So let's go through the 5 buckets of labs, or categories of labs, that really can help you identify where you need support or where you need healing. So the first one, easiest one, and I feel like this is low-hanging fruit, is the thyroid function panel. So your thyroid gland is connected to so many systems in your body. It is critical. And oftentimes, initially, when your thyroid starts to shift, you might not feel huge changes, but maybe, your hair starts to fall out a little bit, or, you're colder in your hands and feet than you normally are. Things like that. It could be subtle, or it could be drastic, where a ton of hair is falling out, you're losing weight, or all of a sudden you're gaining weight, you can't sleep, or you're sleepy all the time. I mean, your thyroid is connected to so many things. So this is an easy place to start. The hard part is that most providers will only do a TSH. And if that is normal, then that's the extent of the workup. Your TSH is the thyroid stimulating hormone. It's the thing that then tells your thyroid to make hormone, to make, release, etc., thyroid hormone. So your TSH might be normal, and you still might feel cold, tired, you're gaining weight, or your hair's falling out. And so that really signals to me that you really need to look deeper into your thyroid function. because you can have what we call subclinical hypothyroidism, you can have Hashimoto's, or you can have a conversion issue where you don't have enough micronutrients to help the thyroid be converted or help the thyroid travel to where it needs to go into the tissues and do its work. So basic is you want a TSH, you want a T3, and a free T4. You also, if possible, want to look at, if those are all normal, your reverse T3. It's helpful in evaluating thyroid hormone conversion, especially when there's stress or inflammation. And you also want to see if there's an autoimmune issue going on. So you want to look at your thyroid peroxidase antibodies or TPO or TP and TPI antibodies that are critical in determining if you have autoimmune thyroid issues. And then your functional medicine provider can do a calculation of your T3 to T4 and create a ratio. A T3 to T4 ratio is functionally useful to look at your your thyroid function. It's not it's not necessarily a separate lab. It's a calculation that's done. Some people will do iodine testing. That is helpful if there's suspicion of deficiency or suspicion that you have too much iodine, but really it's not necessary for everyone. And so it could be added if needed, but generally that's not a place to start. Okay, so that's your thyroid, how to look at your thyroid. Your HPA axis, or the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, is your stress system, stress response system. And chronic stress changes your cortisol rhythm. Not only your cortisol rhythm, which is directly in the HPA axis, but also changes your blood sugar, your sleep. Chronic stress can make you gain belly fat, can affect your resilience. So many things can happen. And really, cortisol is the thing at the center of it all. So salivary cortisol testing can really show you how your adrenals are functioning and what they're doing. Typically, it's a 4-point test. You can do it different ways, but especially if you wake up tired in the morning after sleeping all night, and then you are wired and excited and ramped up at night and have a hard time going to sleep. If you're waking up in the middle of the night, your cortisol might be to blame. And so looking at your cortisol curve might be really helpful to figure out where you are and then what supports you need in that system. And then looking at your DHEAS, which is critical to see if that high cortisol, or the shifts in your cortisol, I should say, have then affected or started to affect your sex hormones, right? It really evaluates androgen reserve and resilience and answers the question, is my stress impacting my sex hormones? Because often it is, or it can be anyway. Okay, moving on to the third bucket of labs that you can consider. So, micronutrient deficiencies. Identifying micronutrient deficiencies is also key, because micronutrient deficiencies can look like a disease process. So, one example is having low vitamin D. Low vitamin D can give you tons of different symptoms, and so can look like and can also impact. And really, vitamin D, we know that while we call it vitamin D, a vitamin, but it acts as a hormone in our body, and so it's foundational for your immune system, for your hormone system, for brain health. And so testing that is really important. Testing your fasting insulin is also really important, so that you know what your insulin is doing, because we know that elevated fasting insulin can increase your risk of developing diabetes. It also increases your weight gain around the midsection, things like that. We know that fasting insulin is a result of many things, but one of them is chronic stress. And so testing that to see, if that's something that you need to really focus on. Getting an iron panel. We know that ferritin is key. Low and high ferritin is an inflammation risk. And so we want to know what your ferritin is doing, because it then is involved. Iron is involved in many chemical reactions, enzymatic reactions in your body. We want to know what your zinc, selenium, and magnesium are doing. These are essential for your thyroid, for detoxification. They're essential for hormone receptors, and of course your B vitamins, especially B12, B6, and folate, and preferably you want to test methylfolate and B6, P5P when you're getting that tested. So if you're exhausted, if you're foggy, if your immune system is weak, you might be depleted, and this might be the place to start figuring out if you have nutrient deficiencies. Even if you eat healthy, I want to stress that, because oftentimes you can say like, okay, well, I eat healthy, I get what I need, but one, our food is not ideal. It doesn't have as much nutrient density as it used to. We know our soil is depleted, etc. And then the other issue is you might eat healthy, but is that food, are those micronutrients being absorbed in your gut? Are you having gut issues, which we'll talk about testing that as well. But the one thing about eating it is it has to get absorbed, it has to get in your body, in your blood, and then to where it needs to go. So much can happen to impact that. Okay, let's move on to bucket number 4, and that's your hormone balance assessment. So especially if you're 35 or older, hormones are shifting. Okay, you might start noticing things like mood swings, changes in your period, maybe painful periods, maybe low libido, maybe weight gain starts to creep up. So that can signal imbalances in estrogen, progesterone, or testosterone. And so you can test these with blood, saliva, urine. There are pros and cons to testing for each each way, and so you would have to work with someone to figure out which testing is best for you and how to test. But again, if you're having those symptoms, this is something to consider, and at least look at the overall picture of what your hormones are doing and the different hormones. And I outline in that PDF, the different hormones to test, etc. And then when you are doing hormone testing, if you're having cycles, you're going to have to test at the correct time of the month so that you get really valuable and meaningful results. Okay. Bucket number 5 is inflammation and gut health. So it's last but not least, your gut and your immune system are super interconnected. They're essential. And so when testing or looking at gut health, some easy ways to look at gut health would be looking at C-reactive protein. And so that's the best global marker of inflammation. You could do stool testing. So, GI stool testing for microbiome health, looking for pathogens, things like that. So that's a really good test. And then looking at zonulin and calprotectin, and oftentimes you can test those things on the stool test at the same time. So checking for gut permeability, sensitivities to certain things that have caused gut permeability. So when would you consider testing your gut? If you have bloating, if you have skin issues, maybe joint pain, even autoimmune disease, this is really a good place to look, because your gut, again, is so closely connected to your immune system, to your hormones. And so you're going to get your biggest return on your investment here. Looking at your gut and figuring out how to fix it, because it is the root cause of so many things. Things like fatigue, things like brain fog can really stem from inflammation in your gut, microbiome imbalances, pathogens, and things like that. So if you have chronic low-grade inflammation and microbiome imbalances, that can contribute to hormone issues, autoimmune diseases, mood disorders, fatigue, and even metabolic dysfunction. And so this panel really reveals, especially like that stool testing, right, with the zonulin and the calprotectin, really reveals the silent disruptors that you might not pick up on other testing, like blood testing. Okay, so why do these labs matter more than having a diagnosis? Here's what I want you to know. You don't have to be sick and you don't have to have a diagnosis to check your health and to start working on your health. We get depleted over the years, and oftentimes we don't know that that depletion is happening. So in our 20s, our immune system is strong, but over the years, over 10 years, you're getting more and more stressors. Maybe you've had babies. And so all of that, maybe you breastfed, it depletes our system. It depletes our nutrients. As we're exposed to toxins, that can affect our GI system, our gut permeability. And so, you don't have to be sick to get tested and to work on your body and work on your health. And so these labs can really help you spot imbalances early, especially if you're already having some symptoms. So I put all these labs in a guide for you. You can download it absolutely free. I'll link it in the show notes so that you could look at the labs, consider the labs, and really, you're allowed you're allowed to have clearer thinking, better and more energy, right? And feel the way that you felt. And so maybe that buildup of toxins or that depletion of micronutrients, or maybe a pathogen in your gut is contributing to you having symptoms. And so figuring out what those things are, and then, working to get rid of that, can help you feel better faster. And you don't have to feel like you're crazy having symptoms and your conventional labs are normal. And so I just want to encourage you. And if you already are feeling amazing, then great. Maybe share this with somebody who, is struggling with their health or is not feeling well. And now you know how to interpret your labs better. So if, you have friends that need this information, please share with them. And if you want to take the next step, if you are having symptoms, I am building a hormone reset program. And so you can join the waitlist for that. I'll put the waitlist link in the show notes. We use a holistic root cause approach to help you optimize, not just survive. So that's coming. And as you know, we have a tradition on this podcast where we do a life optimizer challenge each week after talking to each other. And so this week, this one's a little bit of a hard one, I would say. And that is, I would encourage you to look at your symptoms as I went through quickly through the 5 buckets. See if you can identify one area where your symptoms are kind of heaviest, where they're screaming at you, like, your hair is falling out, you're cold all the time. Well, that's thyroid. How can you support your thyroid? Increasing your micronutrients, making sure you're eating regularly, making sure that you're lowering stress. And we know that's going to help with all hormone function, not just thyroid. But if those are your symptoms, and then potentially considering getting a little bit more extensive testing. If the micronutrients, the lowering the stress, etc., haven't worked, what else can you do? And then focusing on that. So I would say, see if you can identify an area where your hormones are kind of screaming the loudest, and use that as a starting point. I also have a free symptom tracker. If you wanted to do that, you could use the symptom tracker, track your symptoms for a week, and it helps you identify which system is kind of louder, so to speak. It's also free. I'll put it in the show notes as well. Or you can just kind of, as you went through this episode, say, hey, it's, my thyroid, or it's my cortisol, or maybe it's my libido's low, so maybe it's my sex hormones. The hard part is they're all connected. So the good news is, as you start to make one better, the rest of them are going to be better. So that's always really exciting. Let me know what you're working on. Let me know if this was helpful for you. I always want to know if what I'm doing here is helpful. So let me know. I'm so glad you're here. I'm thankful for the time that you've spent with me. Have a lovely rest of your day, and I will see you in the next episode.